Hey, good morning, everyone. It's been a while, but I got another video for you here. And so this one, I'm talking about wrestling Twitter, just how much of an influence should it have on booking. And so I was inspired to do this because I saw there was a report, earlier this week about the number of what we call heavy Twitter users. And heavy Twitter users are described as people who log on to Twitter every day and tweet 3 or 4 times a week. Now, if you follow me on Twitter, you know I do way more than that. and you might also, okay, which means like we're not in that heavy Twitter users make up, according to this report, 10% of people who are on Twitter. The top 10% tweet 3 or 4 times a week and they log on every day. So if you're like me, that means we're probably in like the top 1%. So what's this got to do with pro wrestling? Well, let's see. Well, because if you follow me on Twitter, if you talk to me at all on Twitter, you probably talk to other wrestling fans on Twitter, and there are definitely people who think that wrestling Twitter should be the law of the land as far as how people book their shows. There are people who think wrestling Twitter is a super influential thing, or should be this super influential thing, and that should only be true if wrestling Twitter makes up a big enough portion of the audience to control how many people are watching the show. So do they? Short answer is no. But I'm going to explain how we get there. Okay. All right, let's zoom in here on the old computer. All right. So, line number 1. Population of the United States estimated last time I looked 330 million people. Might be a little bit more than that, or I might be a little high there. But 330 million people. Okay. Monetizable Twitter users is another number I looked into. 30 million people in the United States are monetizable Twitter users. What does that mean? That means you use Twitter enough for Twitter, the company, to include you in the number they give to advertisers so they can charge them ad rates to advertise on Twitter. That's how they make money, basically. So 30 million out of 330 million people. So that's 9% of the population. Okay, now the next number is an estimate. Okay, and I'm estimating that there are 5 million wrestling fans in the United States. Is that high? Is it low? Well, all right. SmackDown on average. SmackDown is the highest watched television show, wrestling television show, according to Nielsen, and they get just short of 2.1 million viewers on average. Now they've gotten as high as 2.5, and sometimes they go as low as 1.8. But on average, they get like 2.1, basically. So if you count all of them, and you take into account the fact that Nielsen undercounts people, so those live audience numbers you see for Nielsen, if you're enough of a nerd to look them up, those numbers are all low. Okay, there are more people out there than they're counting. So, and it depends. It could be anywhere from 6 to 10% low. So basically, if 2.3 million people watch SmackDown on television, and then you count in the people who watch it in Monday Night Raw and other WWE programming through other means. Some people watch it on Hulu. Some people watch the YouTube highlights. Some people watch the shows a few weeks later on Peacock. And there are other streaming ways to watch, some that involve a pirate flag. Okay. If you add all of those people up, plus the people who do not watch WWE programming, but are wrestling fans who watch other things instead, if you total all of them up, if 5 million people is probably a bit generous, but it's probably not too far off. So for the sake of this exercise, we're going to use 5 million people. All right. So the next thing is, and then line 4, heavy Twitter users. So heavy Twitter users are 10% of Twitter users, or monetizable Twitter users. 10%. Okay. That's it. So, out of the wrestling fans in the world, or in the United States, I'm sorry, how many are likely on Twitter? Well, if there are 5 million wrestling fans and 9% of the U.S. population is on Twitter, that would equal 454,000 wrestling fans who are on Twitter and who are monetizable Twitter users. Okay. And that means, again, you use Twitter enough for them to make money off of you. 450,000. Okay. Not a lot. Now, out of the heavy, how many of those are heavy users? Right? The heavy users, 10%, top 10%. That's 45,000 people. Not very much in the grand scheme of things. And now we know if you pay, again, if you're enough of a nerd to follow ratings, which I beg you, don't be like me, okay? Don't. But with Monday Night Raw, it's a 3-hour show. The hour number 3 always drops from hour number 1, and the average drop over the last couple of years is 185,000 people. And I looked these numbers up and I did all the math myself because I'm that much of a nerd. Again, don't be like me. Okay? But anyway, 185,000 people. Now, and understand that a lot of those people drop off from hour number 1 to hour number 3 because there is an hour number 3. Meaning, in other words, the show is 3 hours long. Some people are going to stop just because. Some people are going to watch an hour. Some people are going to watch 2 hours. But there are going to be people who just can't do 3 hours of anything in a row other than like an NFL game or something. Okay. So we're not even talking the number of people who just can't sit through the 3rd hour of a wrestling show on Monday. All right. Fewer people than that. So again, 45,000 people approximately who would qualify as heavy Twitter users who are also wrestling fans. Now, if you're a frequent, wrestling Twitter, person, like I am, unfortunately, you would know that, that it's really not that many people who are doing most of the tweeting or who are the loudest people on Twitter. Right? I mean, okay, I got 927 people that I follow. I actually talk to maybe 100 of them. Okay? So when we look at how many people there are, the loudest ones, the most vocal ones, the ones that swear they know who is popular and who isn't and all this kind of stuff, it's largely the same people tweeting all the time. So it's not even the 45,000 that we're talking about. Who knows? Think of how many people you engage with every day if you're a wrestling fan, and think of how many of those accounts there are that are just loud and get retweeted a whole lot and everything. Not that many. So even if just looking at the 45,000 who are wrestling fans who would be qualified as heavy Twitter users, and again, that doesn't mean they're tweeting about wrestling all the time either. So if they tweet 3 or 4 times a week, maybe one tweet is about professional wrestling. The rest might be about cats or movies or food. Okay. And by cats, I mean like sharing like cat videos or something, right? Or politics, right? So this number gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller to the point where who knows how small it is. All right. Now, okay, so if there are 5 million wrestling fans, like I said, then 90% of those people are WWE fans of some form or fashion. Either they're WWE only, or they watch WWE plus other companies, AEW or New Japan or Impact or whatever. All right, so again, if there are 5 million wrestling fans in the United States, active wrestling fans, then 4.5 million of those are WWE fans in some form or fashion. So that would mean that if the same 9% of WWE fans are monetizable Twitter users as there are, if the same rate of WWE fans are using Twitter that the general population of the United States is using Twitter, then you're talking about just over 400,000 people. All right, and then if we're going to get down to the heavy Twitter users, now we're talking 40,000 people. Okay, that are WWE fans who are heavy Twitter users. If you look at people who watch SmackDown, again, average audience 2.08 million people. That would mean that just under 200,000, 189,000 of those people are Twitter users, and like 19,000, just under 19,000 are heavy Twitter users. So now, basically, what you're saying is if you think that they should listen to wrestling Twitter, you're basically saying that they should listen to 19,000 people out of 2.8 million, 2.1 million people. 19,000 out of 2.1 million people is what you're saying, who you're saying they should listen to. Okay? Not a good idea. It's just not. And because those people, they don't represent the audience as a whole. The 19,000 don't represent the 2 million. And we see it every week. And look, I mean, you can look at what's been said about Ronda Rousey on wrestling Twitter since she came back, and listen to the crowds in the arena when she comes out to the ring every Friday on Fridays. Okay, you can, and look, it goes with, you can rinse and repeat with a bunch of different people, and there are also people for whom wrestling Twitter is really high on, and the general audience is not. So that's what it is. Very small number of people who are very loud on Twitter and who get retweeted a bunch and who get responded to and replied to a bunch by the rest of us, and there are not that many of us either. And yeah, just moral of the story here is no, you should not book your wrestling show according to what you see on wrestling Twitter. You should not, because it is a very small number of people compared to your total audience. So remember that if you're a wrestling booker and you're watching this video, remember that. If you're a wrestling fan and you're watching this video, remember that. In both cases, if you're listening to me talk about this stuff, you're probably as big a nerd as I am, which God help you. Anyhow, till next time.